Well, welcome to First Presbyterian Church of Corvallis. My name is Pastor Scott Crane. I'm the pastor here. And I just want to welcome all of you on behalf of Alexis and Ron and Mandy Griffiths and their family. I welcome you to this service of remembrance for Bob Griffiths, known to many of you as Griff. I've heard a few stories of how Griff exhibited joy in nature. We've seen some of the pictures up here as well of that, and his many travels with friends and family over the years, and the impact that he has had on those of you gathered here this day. It's a gift, a great gift to be cherished, the gift of Griff. As stories about Griff are offered up in memory for all of you, and let me begin with a simple earth blessing rediscovered from an early branch of the spiritual tradition that we share here. Grace of the love of the skies be thine. Grace of the love of the stars be thine. Grace of the love of the moon be thine. Grace of the love of the sun be thine. And as we begin our time of remembrance, there are 4 folks that will be coming up to speak. Maya will be our first.
I forgot my hearing aids, so I didn't. Sorry. Anyhow, well, I'm first reading comments from Joanne Leong, and Joanne was a very, very dear and special friend of Griff and Betty's and Mandy's, and Joanne is the reason I know Griff. So, and Joanne and Oren would love to be here today, but they're in Indonesia, and it was difficult to change their plans. Okay, so this is from Joanne. Robert Griffiths and his family were part of our family in Corvallis. We enjoyed and valued his friendship, and we will miss his presence in our lives. We last spoke the day before he died, and I can still hear his hearty laughter as we commented on the droll events going on around us. Griff introduced us to river rafting, cross-country skiing, homemade sourdough bread, crabbing in Waldport, and monthly gourmet dinners. Those dinners were a way to keep us all together as our careers took us to different parts of the country. Griff was an exceptional microbiologist. Joanne had been head of the Department of Microbiology at OSU, whose research involved studies in the Arctic and the Antarctic Ocean with Richard Morita. When Griff left the department to begin studying the microbiome of forests, he introduced us to the concept of microbial communication amongst trees. I admired Griff's love for the science and his ability to balance time for family, friends, and work. I remember a gourmet dinner that Griff cooked for us. It was Chinese food, since I refused to cook Chinese for these dinners. I had chosen Hawaiian, Ethiopian, and Japanese when it was my turn, and Joanne was a really good cook, or is a really good cook. But for Griff, he made a typical Chinese 9-course dinner with each dish served separately. When it was 1 a.m., we all decided that we would continue the meal the next day. Griff came to my office one day and spoke to me about Gail. He said, "You should consider taking her as a doctoral student. She is bright, enthusiastic, and creative." Boy, was he ever right about that. I could go on with so many stories of how our lives were connected and enriched. We will miss him greatly and wish we could be there to comfort Ron, Alexis, and Mandy. And now I'm going to read thoughts from Art McKee. Some thoughts on the passing of a much respected and very good friend. In early October, the internet to our house in rural Montana was down for a few days. When it came back up, One of the first emails that I read was a notice from a colleague at Oregon State University that our mutual friend Griff had recently died. I simply sat there in shock. For several minutes, I just kept looking out the window at the morning sunshine on the hills and the trees around our house, remembering how quickly Griff had become a close friend for those very qualities that everyone present undoubtedly associates with Griff. And I reflected on all the good times with Griff in academic settings, on national and international trips, out in the field, sampling in the short courses at the Andrews Research Forest, and out drifting rivers, enjoying the rapids, enjoying the camaraderie around the evening campfires. Yeah, but Griff was not just a friend, he was a respected colleague. Following his move across campus in the 1980s from the Department of Microbiology to the Department of Forest Science, we shared the stress over joint preparation of NSF proposals and joy at their funding. We also shared the ups and downs of trips to other ecological research sites, both in the US and overseas, which had the intent of establishing collaborative projects, many of which were successful, in no small part due to Griff's influence. For many years, Griff was one of the top 3 members of the Forest Science Department in obtaining extramural funding for research, often on proposals he co-authored with different colleagues. His success rate was several times that of the average proposal to the respective agencies. Griff rapidly became a highly respected member of the department. His innovative work on the microbiology of forest soils became nationally respected, and I always made sure Griff was a major participant in any National Science Foundation reviews of the Andrews Forest Long-Term Ecological Research Program. As many of you are probably aware, before Griff joined our department, he had conducted some groundbreaking research on microbes that can survive eons in spore form, and also pioneered research in oceanographic microbiology, about which I know very little. He was a remarkably versatile scientist. In 2022, Griff and Mandy visited us in Montana, and Griff had a chance to speak with an internationally renowned marine and freshwater microbiologist at the Flathead Lake Biological Station, Matt Church, who happened to have expanded upon Griff's earlier oceanographic work. Matt approached me a few days later after that visit, all excited about having met the Robert Griffiths, who pioneered an area of research which Matt had further expanded and gained international recognition. Here's an anecdote that captures a lot of Griff's personality. In the mid-1990s, Griff was part of an international delegation to Taiwan, the Republic of China, to discuss possible collaboration between Oregon State University and Taiwanese universities that dealt with forest research. At that time, Griff was focusing on microbiological processes involving fungal structure called mycorrhizae mats. These are indicators of very stable root and fungi symbiotic systems that basically expand the nutrient gathering power of trees and soils that are low in essential elements such as nitrogen and phosphorus. The size and abundance of these mats is an indicator of the stability of that forest ecosystem. At one point in the trip, we were at a high elevation in the mountains during the summer monsoon side of Taiwan in a cloud forest dominated by a local species of cypress that was basically growing in very thin soil or on moss-covered rocks and on blown-down tree trunks. Griff started moving quickly away from our convoy of vans and scrambling around the forest with a military trenching shovel he'd brought on the trip. Our Taiwanese colleagues were puzzled by his behavior, watching him scratch back the soil surface a bit, scurrying around to another spot and repeating the process, jumping over downed logs, basically hustling all over this very steep slope. All of a sudden, Griff jumped up and yelled, "They're here, they're here!" And he held up a whitish piece of carpet-like something or other and waved it as he danced around. He then ran back up the slope to the group and started explaining what he was holding and why this was a vital part of the ecology of this forest growing on such nutrient-poor site. Pretty soon, our Taiwanese colleagues were all excited as well, slapping Griff on the back and yammering away as they handled the mat. Griff was the center of attention for the rest of the day as we went to other forests on that mountainside. Classic Griff. A parting comment. Griff was a complete person who demonstrated both professional and personal integrity. You don't meet many who merge those qualities in such an exemplary manner. I join many of you who will both miss and long remember this fine person. And this is from Art McKee, who was the former director of the Andrews Experimental Forest in the Forest Science Department at Oregon State University, and also a retired research professor at the Flathead Lake Biological Station at the University of Montana. And I just have to say, I feel so privileged in my life to have known Griff, and I'm going to miss him very deeply too.
You already know to come. Great.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was told I need to get way on top of this mic. And up, yes. So how are we doing here? Okay, that works. Great. Well, I'm so glad to see all of you here today. I'm Greg Corper. Pat and I met Griff and Betty in the early 1980s, and so we've had some time to really get to know Griff, and very sad here today. I ask myself, how do we even begin to comprehend and share what we've lost? Over the course of our lifetimes, we will meet many interesting people, but I've never encountered another Griff. The enormity of Griff's presence, his generosity, his aggressive pursuit of life, this man stands unique in my mind. His absence echoes around us, much as his enormous laugh captured and embraced us. That's a soundtrack that isn't going to be erased. Who can forget how often it lifted us? That big laugh remains a glowing reflection of the passion that Griff brought to this world. Who was this complex man? One moment he could be enjoying a Shostakovich cello sonata. The next moment he might be taking pot shots at the crows that dared to eat his cherries. One day he might be pushing his motorcycle past 100 miles an hour with a delighted or perhaps a horrified passenger. And then the next he would be struggling to get a grip on the basics of quantum mechanics. Griff wondered about the nature of time. Is it continuous or a series of discrete steps? Isn't that something we all ask ourselves? Griff was always a seeker. Most of us are. But was there ever a person who exuded more enthusiasm as he reached for every slice of life? He invited us to come along to parties, on vacations, down rivers and along coastlines, a kaleidoscope of adventures that we are all invited to. He thrived on speed, adrenaline, and excitement, and yet he was contemplative and thoughtful, even sentimental. And a nice selection of scotch might be there to help assist in those philosophical moments. Griff was a gregarious giant, offering lifelong friendship for so many people. With Mandy and with Betty, he traveled extensively to visit friends and family and recharge long-standing relationships, exchanging stories of life lived, and often life lived large, delighted Griff, and that delighted all of us too. If a few glasses of homemade wine embellish some of those stories, all the better, of course. Griff was a great and serial storyteller. All who knew Griff heard many tales, whether it was navigating an ammunition ship through the Strait of Malacca or some high school hijinks, also involving explosives, or whatever. It was always had a high entertainment value, if repeated occasionally. I suppose we all have our favorites amongst those stories, and I enjoy remembering a particular story about a gung-ho ship commander whose personal incompetence put a vessel aground in the Sacramento River just above San Francisco Bay. And sure enough, the commander set out to blame his subordinates. But Griff, knowing what was likely to follow, had safely secured the evidence of exactly whose commands had put that ship aground in the channel. And so Griff's quick thinking assured that responsibility for that particular naval maneuver was placed where it belonged. Griff loved that story, and I love it too. No, Griff did not suffer fools casually. His look of unconcealed impatience, when those bushy eyebrows would lean forward in consternation, that could stop a truck. I want to mention, too, Griff's compassion and loyalty. He had run many rivers with his good friend Jan in the early days in Corvallis, and later when Jan was bereft of support and struggling with the progressive effects of frontal lobe deterioration, Griff was there for him, and so were some of you here today. Griff and I had long, painful discussions, scraping for tactics, strategy, some way of offering companionship as Jan's world collapsed. Griff could present a hard exterior, just ask those wary crows. But he opened his heart to others and had empathy for those who struggle. Many of us cope with difficulties that we face as our senses and mobility are compromised by age. Griff fought back. He was determined to squeeze life for every remaining opportunity. When I find myself in a desultory mood, sort of letting life just slip by, I can reach for his example. He inspired us to believe it was worth the effort to demand yet more from life. Rather than submit to obsolescence, Griff made choices. He did not like to relinquish control. And sometimes he chose obsolescence. Suspenders, anyone? I know we have one taker. Thank you. And of course, although it was a magnet for scam calls, he never disconnected his landline. And he rarely hid his contempt for cell phones, although over time he began to realize that they could occasionally be quite useful to him. But commonly, Griff challenged the drift of obsolescence. And despite objections that Big Willie may have had, Griff drove a Prius, and sometimes he parked it next to that enraged beast. In particular, Griff resisted social isolation. Though deeply grieved by Betty's death in 2014, he recognized his need for companionship and love, and he expressed those feelings. Shocking to some, he dipped his toe into online matchmaking. A first encounter went sideways, a disappointment at the time, but fortunately, he kept seeking. He kept seeking, and he was thinking globally, but he acted locally, and he met Mandy. And was that ever a change of attitude for a man who didn't always change gracefully? Today, the bond they formed and the blending, the binding of their families and friends provide us a touchstone of support in this time of grief. And what fun for all of us to have known them and seen them together in these past years. His social creativity didn't stop there. He reached out to his friends and he formed a men's group that met through the dark days of COVID and on into the present. Each month we met on the covered patio, hopefully being sheltered from the rain. In the winter, there was a warming tray in the middle of a circle of boots and shoes, and it provided symbolic heat for us. But if you wore enough clothes, you could get by, especially with the help of Griff's huge bowl of popcorn. Conversations and storytelling were a welcome antidote to the malaise and isolation of that period of time. These meetings are going to continue, and again, we're grateful to Griff. When news of his passing arrived, Pat and I were floored. Incomprehensible that his dynamic presence was gone. How I would like to hear Griff's all-encompassing laugh once again. I always wanted to find the anecdote, the silly situation, the joke that would unleash that laugh. The reward of success was addictive for me. Never again. But in my mind, I keep wanting to hit replay. Considering all this, I realize now more than ever before how multifaceted a man Griff was. And all of you here saw different facets of that man. And we're together here to reminisce and compare those experiences. What a brilliance they cast. What a joy to have known Griff. We grieve, aware of how much we have lost. And we seek solace in sharing memories with one another. We shed tears. And two, let us celebrate the life and times of Robert Griffiths, who thundered through life, awed by the world and the opportunities it furnished him. He vigorously pursued life, offering his generosity and friendship. How fortunate we are. Thank you, Griff. You are irreplaceable.
That was beautiful, Greg. Thank you. So, as I was contemplating about what I wanted to say about Griff today, several character traits kept arising: thoughtfulness, caring, loyalty, curiosity, big-heartedness, and a great sense of humor. He also, not least, loved to have a good time. I could always tell where he was in the room full of people, guffawing with a deep belly laugh, full of mirth. Oh boy, am I going to miss that. I remember many times just sitting and talking together, sharing the books we were reading, thoughts on life, and reminiscing over shared memories. He never tired of telling a good story. Never tired. But he was always a good listener, too, and asked interesting and thought-provoking follow-up questions. He was a real lover of knowledge, and his breadth of interest was wide and deep. He had a rare blend of the benefits of a liberal arts education mixed with a keen scientific mind. After 49 years of marriage, his first wife, Betty, died, as many of you know. After her death, he and I would go for long walks and talk. Her death shook him to the marrow and filled him with a gratitude of a most heartbreaking kind. At those moments of raw vulnerability, I was inspired by his courage to say yes to his own grief. May we all follow his example with tenderness toward our own loss now. In the course of time, Mandy came into his life. He was so grateful for your love and presence that he could scarcely believe his good fortune. Thank you so much for your love of Griff. As Ron said, your love added several years to his life, and for that and many of your other gifts, we give thanks. So now a few short stories. My wife Jane, her Aunt Rita was born in England and moved to Corvallis for the last years of her life. During one holiday season, Griff asked us over for a traditional English Christmas dinner, complete with plum pudding. The gesture so surprised and delighted and brought Rita so much joy. It was so typical of Griff to be thoughtful and generous. Of course, he had a smug smile on his face, too. Jean and I had a small winery for a number of years, and Griff was a member of our A-team, one of 4 or 5 friends who we could count on for help. He would always be the first person to arrive, and as soon as he got out of the car, he would point to his watch and go, "See, I'm here right on time, and you better be ready to rock and roll." As part of our wine education, we would open bottles of wine that were shrouded in a bag and try to guess their origins, varietal, year of production. Griff participated with a smirk and more than a little amusement, sensing a pretentious air in the room. One evening, he invited a number of us over to his house for a blind tasting. The bottles were in their bags. He gave out paper for us to write our guesses. It turned out all the bottles were from the same winery, Yellowtail, the largest winery by volume in the world, and none of the wines were what one would call interesting. For yellowtail aficionados in the room, my apologies. But it was his joke. We had a great laugh and actually drank some of the stuff. I would be remiss talking about Griff without mentioning his deep and abiding love for Ron and Alexis. He always felt you two were the smartest people in the room, and I'll add the most tender-hearted too. You brought such joy to him, and he was so proud of you both. I know dealing with the myriad issues that come with the ending of his life, the smarts and big hearts are now getting quite the workout. So if Griff is witnessing this from the ether, he probably has that wry smile on his face while pointing to his watch as if to say, it's time, JB, wrap this thing up. And so I will. Thanks to everyone for being here and for spreading his love.
Those are very hard acts to follow. Hi, so I'm Gail Curath, another member of the Griff sphere. And that's a term that's been in my mind a lot since the news of his passing. Is one of the first things I thought was how big the Griff sphere was. And basically this room has a lot of the Griff sphere. If you were lucky enough to be in his orbit and share the points on the planet and the times that, you know, if you could just cross paths, and then the more you did it, you could not help but become a member of the Griff sphere, and it's one of my prizes in life, is to be a member of the Griff sphere. Okay. Sorry. A moment. So, it's broad and deep. There's no hierarchies. Everybody's in the Griff sphere. The heart of the Griff sphere is right here. It's Mandy, Ron, and Alexis. I really didn't think I was going to do this, so sorry, I need a moment. And he leaves a big hole, but we're all in the Griff sphere, and the Griff sphere holds each other up. And here we are, holding each other up, which is part of what Griff kind of embodied in life, right? You hold each other up. So, there are members of the Griff sphere that are not here, some of them very dear to him, and I just wanted to call a shout out to the Ericksons, and to the Leongs, and to the Geltzes, and to Jay Nelson, and I'm sure there are many others who would like to be here. Maybe some of them are streaming to you too. The Griff sphere is a very living and breathing part of our world, I guess, and it doesn't really matter where you are. You're with us. So, I am a journal writer. So when I heard of the news of his passing, Joanne Leong called me, and so of course this is the night. And this is when I was trying to figure out what to say today. A couple of the inspirations are from here, so I'm just going to read shortly. It seems impossible, right? That's your first reaction. A spirit so big, so ferociously alive, so strong and so long. One of my dearest friends, and certainly my most genuine role model in how to live life. So, I was 23, which is a long time ago, arriving at OSU for graduate school. I'm going to go to graduate school and I'm going to be a marine microbiologist. And I joined Marita's lab, and Griff was the man in the lab. And I just recently turned it around and realized that that means he was 40, which of course now I'm well past. But I always thought of him, you know, like he was only 40, and here this 23-year-old arrives from the Midwest who has barely seen a mountain, let alone the ocean. The first time I saw a wild sea lion, I wonder who owned it. You know, I mean, it's... I was definitely not a Northwesterner at the time. But then I realized you could live on vacation. And so I learned a lot. And so for me, it's 45 years. And the last thing I'll say is a fabulous, rollicking, sweet, hilarious, and big 45 years. That's from here. So, a couple of tales. You have to pick which tales you want to tell, right? And for me, I worked in the lab with him for a year and a half, and that was great. He was a really wonderful guy. But then I got to go up to Alaska doing field work with him in the summer, the second year of my graduate work. And that was eye-opening. Again, I'm the little girl from the Midwest, right? And I just had never experienced wilderness or competence. He said, "Do you want to work a couple weeks at the field station?" And I said, "Yes." And so he says, "Okay, here's a plane ticket." And I get on this little plane, and we land on a gravel bar that's covered up when it's high tide. You have to plan the landing for when it's low tide. And so this is exciting. And I land on the gravel bar, and there's nobody there to greet me. Nobody. But there's a Jeep over there. Okay. So I walk over to the Jeep. There's no note, there's nobody, but there's keys in it. I guess I'm supposed to take the Jeep. But where's the lab? How am I supposed to know? There's only one road. So get in the Jeep, turn it on, and drive on that road and see if you can find Griff. I mean, it's his expectation for my competence level was fabulous. You know, it's like I didn't need direction. I could just figure it out. It was very exciting. You know, it was great. And sure enough, I drove down that road, and there was Griff. And Bruce Caldwell, another couple of people at the station. So it's a building, and he's cooking dinner. It's a field lab, so I'm expecting that we're going to be eating camp food. You know, we're going to be eating freeze-dried things. We're going to cut open some packets. And he's got gin and tonics, and he's just finished raclette. He's finished making the hors d'oeuvre raclette, and I'm like, oh my God. And he's cooking something like lamb with mint sauce for dinner. And I thought immediately, this is another level of Griff that I don't know. Because I just worked with him in the lab. He never made me mint sauce before. So every night we had long conversations, and he made this incredible food. And so that's where I really began to get to know him, and it was wonderful. But for me, the young scientist, the incredible thing was we'd go out during the day for field work, which meant we were in small boats motoring out in incredible wilderness landscapes, inlets, open water, around islands, and collecting water samples. And, you know, I was getting to help with this. And we'd take them back to the lab, and then we did sample processing, which he showed me how to do. So, okay, we process all the samples, and then we'd end up with little racks of tubes of samples and put them into the scintillation counter and then go have raclette with gin and tonics and whatever he made for dinner that night, while the little samples went through the machine and generated data, right? So I'm pretty new to this. And when you'd come after dinner, then we would all go back to the lab, and you'd look at the data, and you could see him start to work. He'd have his maps out. Where did we take that sample? And what did he learn? And he'd start synthesizing it and putting it together in his mind and saying, what is this telling me? And what do I think it means? And what more do I need to see if I'm right? And then he would design the next day's sampling. So this is real-time science. This is not what I had seen so far. I had seen you read it in books and then you take a test. Or and I had seen where you could do it in the lab, but this was the landscape, and it was, his passion for science was completely infectious. There was no way that I couldn't go into science and make a career of science after that, because I could see his joy, his curiosity. I mean, there's endorphins with discovery, that if you're a scientist and that does it for you, there's nothing else that really does it to the same way. So Griff really gave me that. He gave me that. It's not a dry topic. It's life, and it's right here, and this is how you do it. It was so exciting. So that's kind of my first tale that I wanted to really give some detail on. Don't worry, I will control myself. I know it's this long, but I'll control. So then I finished graduate school and I move off, and we've become good friends by then, and he's taken me rafting, which the only rafting I ever did was with Griff, and it's wonderful. He created those magic events so that you would deepen your relationships, right? And we had visits, and he always made time. Dinner parties, he was cooking Indian and Thai food before anybody else was. Before there were restaurants for Indian Thai food up and down the street. I mean, I remember going and thinking, Indian food? Oh my goodness. And he was just a gourmet cook. He was amazing. So over the time of just being his friend, I realized that he was my best role model in life for how to live life, because he was passionate about science in his career, but he was equally passionate about his friendships. My favorite word is tenacious. If you got into the Griff sphere, you were not getting out. And he would make sure that those friendships stayed alive. And he nurtured them by making events, parties, experiences where you shared time and so forth. So I learned that from him. He was there, he created good times. But he also was there for you in tough times. And he saw me, here I go again. Maybe I shouldn't go there. But be just a second. Breathe a few minutes. And so that's tale number 2. The first one is, and that's the only last tale, so don't worry. So I was looking for a job. I've been postdocing now for some years, and I've been looking for a job for a couple of years. Can't find one. But I want to live in the Pacific Northwest. And at the time, I was studying plant viruses, which is a whole nother, which I won't go into. But so a job became available at OSU. And it was in plant virology. And if I could live back in Corvallis, who wouldn't, right? So I was so excited for this job interview. About 1990. And I come and I'm staying with Betts and Griff, and we're all thinking, this could put our futures together. This is the future I wanted. And I thought I was really close to it. And I went for this interview at Oregon State. And I can't really use Griff's terminology in the Presbyterian Church, but it was a cluster F. Okay, that's all I'm saying. There's a long story there. It was awful. And it was clear that I was not getting that job. And so then I come back and they say, how'd it go? And I thought that was my future. And it just went. And I was so brokenhearted, and Griff could feel it, and that future was not going to be where we were going to be together. And he had to take me back to the airport, like my tail between my legs, feeling awful. And he said, do you want to take my motorcycle to the airport? And I said, yeah. I mean, it was therapy, right? And I have a picture that I put over there. That's Griff putting me on the back of the motorcycle. Betts took that picture. And I had never been on the back of his motorcycle before. And we went 120. 120 down the back roads. We're not on I-5. We're on the back roads to the Eugene Airport. And we're flying. And you know what? Who cared about the cluster F? It just... The job, everything is like, there's still life. And he was having such a good time. And at one point, he slowed down to 60 to show me what it felt like. And I was like, go! It was I have never experienced that before or since. But by the time we got to the airport, somehow it rebalanced. Okay, yeah, that didn't work. You're going to keep job hunting, and you'll find something. But he lifted my spirits in the just a very Griff-like manner. That was an amazing experience. So he gave me great advice for painful divorce. His advice, very amazing. He said, you muddle through. Now that sounds like it says nothing. It says everything. Because no, there's no clear path here. There's no great guidance. You're going to muddle through. And I've used that ever since. I've used it. Thank you. Let's keep it that way. But the other one, so that's great advice. I recommend it if for any situation that you're not sure how to handle it. Grief, go for a walk. And that I've learned also from Mandy. Walking. You know, her emails where, you know, you sign your emails, go for a walk. Just keep walking till it eases up. That's been so helpful. And then 9 years ago when he lost Bets, and he had a very, very difficult time, and we all saw that, one of the things eventually became he wasn't going to look, you can't live life looking backwards. He said you have to look forward. You can't look in the rearview mirror all the time. At a certain point, you have to live forward. And that's something to take now. I think as all of us are going to spend some time grieving, of course, but at a certain point, you have to look forward and make the best of, use your life well. And there was that online dating period, which I remember hearing about too. And I just wanted to publicly thank Maya and Pat and Cindy. Thank you for Mandy, because, oh my God. And Griff, in his classic, he made sure to give us the opportunities to get to know Mandy and to love Mandy. And he nurtured those things. He was a master at nurturing his friendships. And that's what we have to do, right? So, and the other thing is I knew how serious it was when we came to visit Griff and there was a vegetarian cookbook. 3 inches thick, vegetarian cookbook. This woman is in. I just knew this, because that was nothing I had ever seen at Griff's house before. But he was going to make sure he kept a hold of you. I don't know if he ever became a very good vegetarian cook. Maybe not. Oh, yes? Oh, okay. Just wonders with tofu. Okay, that's it. So he was good at so many things. Friendships, like I said, science, rafting, boating, crabbing, gourmet cooking, parties, gardens, his water feature. That water feature is incredible. And he told me how many tons of gravel or rock he moved around the house. I don't know. Traveling, music, everything from classical music to Randy Newman. That's amazing. And then basically just being his genuine self. There was no pretense. He was just who he was. So he seemed to me to be good at most everything, but he was not good at everything. And when I tried to think, what was he not good at? What's the first thing anybody thinks of? Ladders. Okay, he was very bad at ladders. He fell off ladders. Ron told me since his 40s. What was the man doing up on ladders after so many falling off of ladders? So ladders was not a strong point. There were those perhaps, who will be nameless, who thought that perhaps fashion was not a strength. However, I share that affliction, so I can't judge. Because scientists, my husband says scientists are collectively the worst dressed group of people he's ever known. So he can be forgiven for that. And the only other thing that he wasn't really good at, sensitivity testing. You guys have heard that story where he scored negative? I still don't believe that. But so I'm going to close a little bit with, okay. Sorry, I did have it picked out before. Let me just make sure. Oh, okay, Griff had a ball. He had a fabulous life. That is consoling, and it really is, but it does not make up for the loss. The big hole he leaves in my life, that he leaves in everybody's life, right? But of course, this is real, and I'm going to patch that hole up with wonderful memories and with advice. When I need advice, I pretty much know what he'd say, so that advice I know is going to come from Griff. I'm going to muddle through, right? 3, so I wanted to leave you a little bit lighter with 3 Griffisms, phrases that are, I only read one, and I'm sorry to the church, balls to the wall. balls to the wall. He lived life that way in every way. The other one is I want you to picture him laughing and saying, oh shit, oh dear. Oh shit, oh dear was a biggie. And my personal favorite is pucker brush. Because I had never heard anybody else. Is that from Ohio? Is that an Ohio term, pucker brush? You guys know? I just wondered, see, I have to look at his siblings and say, did he say that as a child? No, okay. But when you were out in the pucker brush, you knew you were away from civilization. And for me, the thought of him listening to Randy Newman, Cherokee Wedding, and laughing so hard that tears came out his eyes and saying, that's the best, that's the best. And I would say, Griff, you're the best, you're the best. So the sphere goes on, we're here for each other, especially Mandy, Alexis, and Ron. We are not letting go of you guys, right? We're here. The Griff sphere is still here. And we're lucky to be in it. And I think it's pretty great to be in it, and I'm honored to be in it. That's me.
Thank you for all the stories that we've heard and the snickers and laughter I've heard in the background from all of those stories that you heard. And this is really good to have the Griff isms come out and touch us yet again. I'd like to have you share out loud with me the sending blessing that's in your brochure. If you just want to read it along, then I'll give you a charge and a benediction, and you can mingle some more. So together we say this: Griff, you go home this day to the home of winter, to the home of autumn, of spring. Sleep, oh sleep, in the guidance of guidance. Sleep, oh sleep, in the love of all loves. Sleep, oh beloved, in eternal embrace. When we gather in times like this and offer our stories and memories of loved ones who have passed before us, it is not an ending, but a beginning. Each of these stories and memories also embrace the gifts of memory. Let them touch you. And so we say, amen. Deep peace be with you. Light eternal shine upon you. Like clear flowing springs within you, may the breath of the wind stir your souls. May love hold you. May spirit guide you all the days of your life. Friends, let your time of mingling begin. We have some things over here for you to share. Thanks again.
In America, you get food to eat. Won't have to run through the jungle and scuff up your feet. You just sing about Jesus and drink wine all day. It's great to be an American. Ain't no lion or tiger, ain't no mama snake. Just a sweet watermelon in the buckwheat cake. Everybody is as happy as a man can be. Climb aboard, little walk, sail away with me. Sail away, sail away. We will cross the mighty ocean into Charleston Bay. Sail away, sail away. We will cross the mighty ocean into Charleston Bay. In America, every man is free. Take care of his home and his family. Be as happy as a monkey in a monkey tree. You're all gonna be an American sail away, sail away. We will cross the mighty ocean into Charleston Bay. Sail away, sail away. We will cross the mighty ocean into Charleston